standard for the last number of years, all the way back to when Apple came up with the color line maps. Does anybody remember what year that was? 1998. That's when Steve Jobs came back to Apple. Anyway, but sadly, since COVID, we haven't been there for 2 years, so I'm very excited to be back teaching, so I'm glad that you're all here this evening. So let me just introduce myself a little bit. If you can't hear it, I have a Canadian accent, so I grew up in Canada. I'm 64 years old. I've been living in the States longer than I ever lived in Canada. So I came to the United States in 1984. My wife and I I went to grad school at the University of Illinois in Chicago. And some people, when they call me on the phone, they say, "Hey Scott, I've been to your website and I read that you have a degree in physiology from the University of Illinois." And I said, "Yes, that's true." But they're thinking that are kind of polite enough to not necessarily ask is, well, if that's the case, if your PhD is in physiology, why are you working on Apple computers? So a simple answer to that is, I'd like to think I was successful in research. And to be successful in research, you need a very specific skill set. But I was not very good at writing grants for the funding for the research. So rather than change my skill set, I just chose to take the same skill set and apply it to computers. Having gone to grad school, I've had a lot of professors who are simply lecturers. Very few were teachers. I've taken it upon myself to be a teacher. And my job is to be able to communicate in a way that helps you understand, more importantly, enjoy your iPhones, iPads, and Apple computers. So that's the whole idea. Now, if anybody says to me, "Well, Scott, I'm too old to learn," I say that the more we learn, the younger we stay. And I'll use my mom as an example, who's 98 years old. She's in St. John, New Brunswick. I FaceTime with her every Sunday. She will answer me with emojis, and she texts me back and forth. The only thing that she deals with is when we're FaceTiming, meaning the camera's on her, she doesn't pay attention to where the camera's pointing. So next thing I'll know, I say, Mom, I can't see you. But then she'll bring it back down again. Okay? So that's the premise that I like to come and teach you at. In this type of setting, we do have to do it a little bit more lecture style. I do realize, of course, there's different levels of learning and teaching. So my job is to hopefully hit some of the overviews and highlights of things. Hopefully I'll maybe have anticipated some questions that you've already been thinking. And if not, I was talking to Lindsay that if we need to reschedule another get-together 2 or 3 times down the road, I'm more than happy to do that. Okay? So why don't we get started? So I'm going to end up switching back and forth between my laptop and here, so we'll have to kind of figure out how this is working. So when I was at the Senior Center, I developed a curriculum, and I chose the iPhone, and here's some of the topics that we're going to learn. We're going to talk about iPhone anatomy. Now you might say, "Well, Scott, what do you mean by that?" Well, it's a play on the fact that the Mac doctor, and this doctor still makes house calls, so I thought, well, let's talk about iPhone anatomy. What do I mean by iPhone anatomy? Essentially, it's just, what are all the physical buttons? Now, of course, when I developed this, the home button was still a physical button on the front. So some of you may have still like the SE or some of the older models still have a physical button. But now, of course, they took that away. So we're going to deal with the fact that there's no home button here and how do I accomplish what I need to do. Gestures is the other big thing that we're going to talk about tonight. You might say, well, what do you mean by that, Scott? Well, gestures, there are a lot more gestures than you realize that are on there. I'm not going to try to overwhelm you with too many, but I'd like you just to feel comfortable that you'll kind of know, oh, I'm looking for something, how do I find it? Does anybody ever have that frustration to say, well, I know what I'm trying to do, and let's say my teenage or younger grandchild shows me all these things. Can somebody give me an example of, do you find that your grandchildren are good teachers? Or they may be good at doing this, but they may not be necessarily a good teacher. Would that be a fair statement? Because I've had that feedback sometimes. In fact, my son, since most of you don't know who I am too, my daughter is in accounting at the university, up at the United Fire Group in accounting, and then my son is a Navy helicopter pilot. He was also on Jeopardy. He was a 5-time winner on Jeopardy. And I say that he clearly takes after his mother. And currently, he's still in the Navy as a helicopter pilot. The Navy starts wanting them to get leadership training. And leadership training means that the Navy, and thank you very much for your tax dollars, are paying for my son to get an MBA at Stanford right now. So he's currently at Stanford. So the reason I bring up Paul is when he was at home here, he had a job to work in the dermatology department, he was told to teach seniors how to use the automatic login or kiosk test. He said, Dad, I've grown up with computers, I don't know how to teach. So hopefully, because I'm 64 and closer to everybody's age here, like I said, back to the fact that I want to be a good teacher. Okay? All right. So other things that we won't cover tonight, of course, is screen organization. Situational awareness, that's kind of a military term. What I mean by that, situational awareness, those little teeny tiny icons that are on the screen are not just there for show, they're there for a reason. And if I can help you understand what some of those are. Siri, does everybody like to talk to Siri?
Love to.
Okay. Does she answer back very well? No, I jokingly say if she was my administrative assistant, I would have fired her a long time ago because I'll ask her a very important question. She said, I'm sorry, I can't do that right now. But yes, there are some certain things that she can do well. And then lastly, of course, because Siri is not kind of like the level of Star Trek or Star Wars anymore with verbal computers, is we still have to learn how to type. Okay? So why don't we get started? So iPhone and admin. So this is where I'm going to end up kind of switch the... So I'm going to go over these, but then I'm going to, because of the switching back and forth, it might be easier just kind of go over the slide first, and then I'll give you a demonstration on my phone. Is that okay? I think that'll work. Okay, like the lock button is on the right-hand side. Now, I'll just hold this up to you, just to show it here, and I'll do it again on the screen in a minute, but just to kind of go over it. So there's a button on the right-hand side of it, it's called the lock button. Some people call it the on-off button. So for example, here it is here, and I'm going to go ahead and press it. Did I turn my phone off? Or what did I do? You're shaking your head, what did I do? Essentially, I just locked the screen. I just turned it so it's like a screensaver where the fact that it's not using any electricity or power, whatever too. So all that to be careful of. When you talk about the lock button, make sure that's all it does. Is it just, if the screen is on, if I'm in the middle of something, and then if I hit it, it's just a way of making the screen go dark. Okay? That's the physical button on this right-hand side. Okay, volume up and volume down. That should be pretty obvious, right? There's two buttons on the left and right, or on the left side. There's up and down volume. Okay. Now, does everybody know what the silence button is and what it does? And what's it for?
Silence your phone.
Silence your phone for what reason?
If you're in a presentation.
You're in a meeting, you're at church, you're whatever, you don't want your phone ringing, dinging, and whatever too. Now my wife gets really mad at me because I not only have mine turned on, meaning nothing's going to get through, I turn off all the notifications. So if somebody calls, texts, or whatever, it's not going to interrupt me. That way, if I'm working at someone's phone and they're paying for my full attention, they're getting 100% of my attention. That's the intention. Okay, so that's it's a little flip thing here too. Okay? Now, if I do want to turn my phone off, and is it a good idea to turn your phone off and on every once in a while? What do you think? I would say yes. And the reason is what? Like a computer, everything gets running in RAM, and if you leave it there for too long, my best analogy I'll use the computer as an example, same thing with your phone. If you leave your computer on for a long period of time, the applications you've been using are using up RAM memory. Now you may quit the application, but there's still part of it still in the RAM. And the best analogy is like a bunch of guys standing around the snack table, on football, Super Bowl Sunday, right? Now there's lots of food at the table, but if you guys leave those guys there long enough, what's going to happen? The food's going to disappear, and that's where the computer starts crashing because there's not enough RAM to work. So the phone is the same way. Now on my phone, it's actually a two-button connection. It's the upper right, the volume up, and the lock button at the same time. So I'm going to press and hold them, and eventually it'll come up to this screen here. Have you seen that screen before too? Now one very good thing on this too, when I'm especially working with perhaps young women or whatever too, on this screen is also the emergency SOS. Now you want to be careful, but if you're ever in a dire situation too, where you need to call 911, this is one way to activate that. So if I wanted to turn my phone off, I'm just going to swipe it from left to right and turn it off, or I can cancel in this case. Okay?
What about emergency? I didn't get that part.
Oh, it's just that the emergency would call 911 for you.
If you do.
Yeah, if you press and hold the upper volume button. Now I know that's a few too many steps, but it says emergency SOS there. Okay, so let me, when I get to the last screen here, the last one is taking a screen snapshot. Does everybody know how to take a screen snapshot? And if not, I'm going to show you very quickly. Okay? All right, so let me do this on the phone. And then you'll just, so I'll repeat what I'm doing here. Okay, so here's my phone. So the first thing is I hit the lock button. So it goes to sleep. Okay? I did not turn it off. I just put it to sleep. Whatever. Okay? I need to wake it back up again. Now, while I'm on this lock screen, I'm going to come back to this. There are some gestures here, but anyway. Obviously, in my case, I can just swipe up again. Okay? Next is the volume up and down. That should be pretty obvious. The silence button, again, that should be pretty obvious. Now, the last two I want to talk about is the off button. So if you couldn't see what I was doing before, pressing and holding it brings up this screen. So this is what I meant by the emergency SOS. If I were to slide that to the right, alarms would go off, 911 would get called, whatever too. And what's the nice thing about an iPhone is it has GPS in it, right? So if you were in dire circumstances and were not able to verbally speak, the police could find your phone with GPS. Yes, ma'am.
Does location services have to be turned on?
Yes, there's,
yeah.
Exactly. A lot of those are, yes. I'm just kind of giving you the heads up here, but we won't get into all the details there too. And then lastly, taking a screen snapshot. Did somebody say that they're used to taking screen snapshots? This is nothing new to them? How many people play Wordle? Okay. Now I'm not going to, have you done it today yet?
Yes.
Okay, I don't want to give any spoilers out, but let me, for example, I'm going to go Safari. And let me just get here just a second. I'm going to go to, actually, so just so you know, there actually is a Canadian version of Wordle. It's called Canuckle. So this is, so does everybody understand the principle of this? It's, just 5 letters. We start guessing. Everybody has their own favorite starting word. I like sauté and irony because it gets rid of all the vowels or lets me know what they are. But anyway, all that to say, this was not a great game. It's only 5. It took me 5. Sometimes I can do it in 3. My record is 2. Anyway, but let's say I want to share that with somebody. So back to the physical buttons, the same 2 buttons that I used to, go to shut down the screen is I'm going to press and hold it, and it takes a screen snapshot of it. And if I wanted to share that with my daughter, I could just grab it and just touch it. And this is a screen where you can do a lot with it. You can, essentially, this is a way of editing this shot, this image that we've taken. So what I would normally do, and again, I'm not going to spend too much time on this, but immediately it is in a position for cropping. So in this case, what I'm going to do is I'm going to just slide up from the bottom and stop there, and then slide down from the top. Okay? And I don't need to do it. You could do annotations, you could write on it, you could add arrows or whatever too, but in this case, I'm keeping it simple. Now I want to send it to my daughter. So the upper right button is very important. This kind of falls in the category of what I said about situational awareness. What do all these buttons do? Very importantly, the upper right button with the box and the up arrow means I want to share it. Okay? Well, I want to share my now cropped image of my Canuckle. And you've probably seen this screen before. Essentially, it's answering the question, well, how do you want to share it? Do you want to send it via AirDrop is one thing we can talk about with pirating messages and mail. Okay? So if I wanted to send this to my daughter, I'll just say, send it to here, and my daughter's name is Laura. So there's Laura Nelson. And I'll just send it, obviously, again, more situational awareness. What's that blue button mean? That's you're ready to send it. Okay? Very simple. But now here's the last thing. I sent it to her. But now, if I say done, if I click on done in the upper right-hand or left-hand corner, it'll say, what do you want to do with it? In this case, you could delete it because you don't want on your phone, you don't want it to be taken up. Now, if you look at my, you'll see that I have a lot of mine set there anyway, right? So I can save it to files. What are saved to files? That's files on the iCloud. We don't have to worry about that tonight. But more importantly, you can save it to photos. So I can just choose whatever I like. So I'm going to just say save it to photos. Okay? All right, so any questions on iPhone and Navigator? Yes, ma'am.
Get it down, up and down. Say that again.
When I was cropping it?
Yes.
Is that what you meant? Okay, sure. I'll reproduce that. I took the picture now, and I'm going to touch it here and bring it up in edit mode. The corners here look like little handles. So that's an idea that, oh, I could grab that handle, I could move it. Okay? And if I wanted to, I could even take this corner and move it over this way if I wanted to. See what I mean? So it's just a way of cropping. Okay? So again, these are examples of just a second here. Those are there for a reason. Those are part of the situational awareness. They're there for a purpose. They're to give you the idea. It's a handle that I can grab and move things around. Okay? All right. So let's go back to, we're going to go back to the computer for a second here. Stop mirroring here. And this is where I found that I needed to just join it back up quickly here. So I won't do this too often, but okay. All right, so we're done with iPhone and Nutty. What do all the buttons do? Okay. Gestures. And you see the subtitle there? It said there's more than you think. Does everybody think they know every gesture there is? There's a lot of them, and I'm not even going to hit the majority of the CD, but anyway. Okay. So, again, I think we'll have to go through the process of going through each of these, and then I'll demonstrate it again so you can see exactly what's happening on the phone. So I want to verbally describe it to you, and then we'll give you the example here. Okay, remember how I mentioned that if the phone is locked, if you have an older phone with a home button, you just simply hit the home button and this will come up. And then if you're ready to unlock it, I'll show you that there actually is a little handle at the bottom. And if I just simply swipe up to the bottom, that's how I'm going to unlock my phone now. Of course, because I'm not looking at it, my facial ID, my facial recognition is not going to work. So I need my code anyway. So I'll find something here. Okay. Swipe up at the bottom. Okay, home screen navigation. Okay, this is one thing that you're probably already doing. You know how to do this. But there's a couple of things in here that you may want to pay attention to. There's what's called a home screen. This is the main page. This is where you would probably put your most important applications. Of course, you'll also put them along the bottom, the dock if you want to use that term. But you can also navigate left and right by swiping. Left and right. Now, if I go all the way to the left, it's what's called a widget page. You might say, well, Scott, what are widgets? Well, widgets are applications that are built in, or you can add them yourself, that give you quick information without doing too much to manipulate it. Okay? So, for example, I only have two on here. You'll see in the upper left, that's the battery, and today's weather from AccuWeather. So, to me, those are two very important things. All right? Now, if I swipe, whoops. That, did the phone do something? Okay, I can keep talking. Now, if I were to, now if I were to swipe the other direction, now again we'll see when we get this showing up. Along the bottom are a number of dots, and those dots tell me, well, okay, which page am I on? So again, that's another situation of situational awareness. But if I keep swiping all the way to the right-hand side, then I'll come up with a full page. Has anybody seen one of those? And what's that? Those are all the apps that are on the phone, but not necessarily in use. Okay? So all I did was just, so has everybody got that? So you could just, you're swiping back and forth, and you can go all the way to the left, that's your widget page. Go all the way to the right, that's your application page. And of course, I'll show you in a second how you can search for things. All right, now here's the most important thing. How many people have a phone with no home button? Okay? And how long did it take you to figure out how to go to the home page? Okay? Because it is a bit of a dexterity thing. If I'm over here, way over here on this page, and I cut just a swipe up, it brings me back to the home page right there. Okay? So a swipe up, it's the same as if you are used to clicking on the home button. Home button means what? Take it to the home page. Okay? So that's what I want to differentiate. The home page is the very first page. You can have multiple other pages, but that's the most important one that you're dealing with. Okay? And application switcher is on this phone, it's a swipe up and hold. Now I don't have any apps open, so if I were to open up a couple of apps here, my AccuWeather, and that could come up over here. So if I were to swipe up and hold, this is what's called the application switcher. Again, I'll show you in large size, but the three apps that I just opened are all there. I can choose to switch to them. So if I want to switch to AccuWeather, that's fine. Now, if I were to swipe up, now remember what I said, you like to quit your applications every once in a while so they're not eating into the RAM memory of the iPhone, is you can just simply swipe them up. Okay. So that's a really good habit to get into, is quitting out. Why? And why did I say that? Because if apps are running, what do? They're using resources. And even if you were to, if I had a number of apps open, but turn my phone off and back on again, Apple, to try to make things simple for you, already have those apps running again. So it's not until you manually quit them, as I say. Now, if you want to be really adventuresome, of course, it's fun on an iPad. You can have 2 or 3. Is you can actually do 2 at a time. Okay. But most people will just swipe. You know, it looks like they're exercising their thumb. They're just going up and up and up, and they're just quitting all the apps very quickly. Okay. All right. So let's do that on the screen so you can see exactly what I just did. Here we go. Okay. So the lock screen. So we hit that. Now, remember how I said there's a handle down here? That's the handle. In fact, if you leave it long enough, it actually says swipe up to open. Okay? Sorry. So just swipe up, and I open it up. Okay? Now remember how I said so this is my home page. If I swipe and go to the left, that's my widget page. And like I said, you can have a number of things if you want, things that are really easy. I like to keep it simple. You can tell I charged up my phone before I came, right? That's not a bad idea if I'm giving the presentation. And then, of course, does everybody think it feels like 33 degrees outside? I was putting gas in the car. I think it was gusting 35 to 40 while I was standing in the pump. Anyway, so that's the widget page. That's my home page. Now I can keep swiping this direction. Now notice, remember how I mentioned here about the dots along the bottom? Those are the situational awareness idea. Is I'm swiping to page 3, page 4, page 5, and then all the way over here is now, that's my app page. Okay. Now if I'm looking for apps or whatever too, I can just, obviously scroll through them or we'll do a search. But anyway, okay?
Who's the key baby?
That is my grandchild. So my son, the Navy helicopter pilot, like I said, he's at Stanford. They just had their baby, so you can imagine he's in the middle of final exams. He has a newborn at home, a wife that just had a C-section, and a mother-in-law. So, but he thankfully did well with his exams. But anyway, that is Alexander Bruce Nelson. So my son's, okay? All right, so I think what we'll do is I'm not going to put up the text this way. I'm going to verbally describe it from here. Let's go back to the home screen. So there's a term called Spotlight. That's what Apple calls your search feature. You can access it very quickly in the middle of the lock screen. If I just swipe down, and notice I can search for something at the top. Now, what would I want to search for? Well, let's say you thought you downloaded an app for, let's say, ESPN or something like that. And you say, oh my gosh, there's ESPN. So it's a way of finding your apps and things like that. Okay? Of course, I don't need it online. Okay? So on a lock screen, just swipe down from the middle, and I can do a search. Of course, I can get rid of that. So I can search for apps or whatever. That's the primary thing. What if I wanted to search for, my friend's name is Andy Schecklenbach. And right here is Andy and Teresa Schecklenbach, just by starting to type their name on there. So, it's a very useful feature. You say, well, I know it's in here, where is it? Why don't we just get some help and search for it? So that's what is searched there now. Remember how I told you I don't have too many notifications going on my phone, I don't want to ding you or two, but in the lock screen, if I were to swipe up, you'll notice that there are no older notifications. Meaning that if some notifications, either text, phone call, or whatever had popped up there, sorry, here, let me change my default time setting here for the lock screen. See, lock screen. Yeah, I'm forgetting where it is now too. All right, I won't worry about it. Okay, so the search feature also works not just on the lock screen, as I just told you, but anywhere. If I just in the middle, again, just swipe down, I can get to the search feature. So it's very handy. It used to be that it was only available on one screen, but now it's available on every single screen that you're on. So all the way over here, if I were to drag it down, I can do the search. Okay. Now, the next one that we want to talk about is what's called the control center. Has everybody heard of that? You saw me just use it a minute ago. So it's a swipe down, in this case, from the upper right-hand corner. So I'm going to swipe down, and this is the control center. Okay, and while we're here, let's just talk about a few of these. Just we're here. Let's start in the upper left. What's the airplane for?
Airplane mode.
Airplane mode, which does what?
Turns off Wi-Fi and cellular.
And Bluetooth. And anything that's any wireless signal, it's getting turned on. Why? Because they say it's going to. Now, I've not done a lot of reading, but apparently with all the new 5G networks, that 5G is potentially interfering with the radio transmissions to the airport and the airplanes. Next one over here is what? That's cellular. That's what I said.
How did you get that screen?
So again, from I swipe down from the upper right. Now, do you have a? Yeah. So just swipe down from the upper right. Yeah. There you go. See? Okay. That's Wi-Fi. Now, here's a handy place that I find Wi-Fi. If I'm getting in my car and I'm just about to pull out of my driveway, and my Wi-Fi is still connected, but I try to do something that's going to try to use the Wi-Fi, but the signal's not very strong, my phone sits there and it just drives me crazy. I said, oh, well, I'll just go to here and I'll just turn off the Wi-Fi. Now, if I turn off the Wi-Fi now, of course, it'll interrupt my signal. Okay? And what's this funny looking bead?
Bluetooth.
Bluetooth? What is Bluetooth?
Wireless.
It's just a wireless interface, keyboards, mice, hearing aids. I had somebody, a gentleman I was working with yesterday, he said, Scott, can you help me with my hearing aids? Okay, what's this one here?
Lock the orientation.
It's called the orientation lock. Either with an iPhone or an iPad. So for example, mine is off. So if I turn my iPhone, that may not work for that. There. All right. So that's what's called it's the orientation lock. Now, if I didn't want that to happen, I would have to go back to my control center and just turn on this lock right here. So let's do that. So I'll just touch it to turn it on. So now it's locked. Okay. This next one here is the screen share, and that's physically how I'm connecting this to the Apple TV. Does anybody have an Apple TV in their home? And it really is kind of nice. Remember the old days of, mom, dad, or a friend coming over and wanting to show you all their colored slides, and they would bring their own cassettes and their own projector. Well, now you've got grandma and grandpa have their own slide projector in their hands as an iPhone or iPad, and if you want to broadcast it just like we are here, you don't want to sit here looking at my teeny tiny screen. We want to be able to project it. So how we're projecting this is through an Apple TV. And that's an Apple TV is a wireless from here to the Apple TV and then to the projector. So, okay. All right. Do not disturb. That's not a bad idea, right? Screen brightness. Okay. And that's the volume for the Apple TV. We're doing this. Does anybody ever use this?
All the time.
Why do you use your flashlight all the time?
It's always with me.
find your keys or whatever. Yeah, it's good. Now, have you been at some rock concerts or something where you're using your flashlight? Okay, I'm just kidding. This is a timer. So these four are all the standard ones: calculator, camera. I've added these myself. This is for a screen recording. So if I want to actually, do a lesson or record some video on my screen, I can just do it that way. This is a really handy one if you ever want to get it turned on. It's a magnifier. So, which is very handy. I'll just describe it. Is that it's uses the really good cameras on here for finding something that is really teeny tiny. So for example, if I'm looking up serial numbers on the bottom of a laptop, the laser engraving is about 2 points high. So it's so fine that the magnifier allows me to zoom in and take a picture of it. So you can take a picture of that at that level. Okay? QRS, just for, you see all these funny looking boxes that says scan this to get a URL, that's fine. This is for accessibility. Let's say that Apple, I think, does an excellent job of making sure that we have the ability to, if we're having either tactile or visual or seeing or hearing issues, that Apple's really good at that. So that there's some features that we want in there. Does anybody know what this one is? This one is very important. It's called Shazam. Have you ever heard that term? And what's Shazam for? Do you ever walk into let's say you're walking through Walmart or whatever, and you hear a really nice song by Taylor Swift or something like that, and say, I wonder what song that is, or who's singing that? Well, what you can do is by touching this, so that's built into the phone, it starts listening and then compares what it's hearing to there's obviously algorithms where they've taken every song and broken it down, and it'll identify what song it is. Okay? So, did I lose my connection here? I'll just join it again. There we go. Okay. All right, then Shazam, and then timer, and then if you do happen to have an Apple remote, and they have these teeny tiny buttons that are really hard to, it's like a little trackpad that are really hard to deal with. This is for the Apple TV, so I can actually control the Apple TV and everything that I want to do with it. Okay? All right, so, what do we have here? Okay. So, a couple of the other gestures that we'd like to talk about are different applications. For example, let me go to mail. I have, several inboxes, so I have 4 inboxes here, whatever, too. Is if I'm expecting an email from someone and it isn't coming, and I'd like to hurry up the process of my phone talking to the server, is I can just swipe down. So this is another gesture where I'm just going to swipe down. And notice what happens at the very top. It's not responding. It looks like a ticker wheel. It's interesting how they changed the interface. It actually used to look like an elastic band that you keep stretching, and when the band finally broke, it would issue the command and say, go and check for new mail. Now notice what also comes up here is similar to what we saw before in the spotlight, is I can also search. So if I'm looking for a specific email from somebody, so here's my friend Jerry Lane. These are all my friends back from Canada. It found all my connections with Jerry Lane. So is this fighting it here, do you think?
It shouldn't be.
Yeah, just. questions so far, just while we're waiting? Lindsay, I'll just stop mirroring and try to join it. Says I'm connected. So any questions so far? Are you such excellent students that you don't need any questions? There. Okay. So last thing, I was just trying to do the mail. Again, just swiping down on the top of that. And then if I want to search for Jerry Lane, there's all the emails from Jerry Lane. Okay. All right.
Even ones that you trash or anything?
Yes. Now normally, I often suggest it's a good idea to empty your trash. I said in your home you wouldn't put everything in the waste bag in the kitchen or the restroom, but you need to get it from there to the street. But I did actually have someone once say, well, Scott, don't empty my trash because I keep things in there. I said, that's not a good idea. Okay? But, okay. So there are a few other, like I said, I think probably the next thing is why don't we look at some photos now? Because we've talked about the idea of gestures. We still have some other gestures here now. You've already all probably done some pinching, is that right? And does everybody know what I mean by pinching? So it's a way of making a picture bigger or smaller. So if you want to make it bigger, you start with your fingers together, and then I spread them apart. So that's interesting that that's not right there. It's okay. Fine, listen to it. Okay? So pinching. Now, I've not done this. Like I said, there's way too many gestures that I don't even use on my phone, but on your iPad, some people say if I want to copy and paste something, you'll swipe together with all your fingers, and then that's the way to copy what was highlighted. And then if you go somewhere else and spread your fingers apart, so it's kind of like all these gestures. I'm giving that as an example as being almost a little bit too extreme. Okay. So the next one, does anybody use maps on their phone for navigation? Obviously, because I'm making house calls, I'm doing that all the time. So there are ways of, same thing on the phone, is that obviously I can spread it out and expand it. Obviously, it shows me where I'm at here, right here on North Scott Boulevard. But does anybody ever have issues with direction? Let's say you're heading south on Dodge Street, and you hit Kirkwood, and you want to go over towards Sycamore Mall. I say, oh my gosh, is that left or right when I hit the T? If you want, you can actually rotate a map by turning it around upside down. So if you're looking at it, then you say, oh, that's the way my brain thinks. I can go upside down. Now, if you turn your map upside down and say, well, you don't want to leave it that way, then of course you can just say there's an arrow here. This arrow just under the car there will actually get me back to the proper orientation. All right. Now, of course, that might drive me crazy. It's doing the real work thing. Can anybody think of a gesture that you use that I may not have covered so far? Can you think of one? See, I'm here to learn too, right? So that's your job, is to make sure you teach me something. Okay? Well, I've got a few more minutes left, and then we're going to try to stop around 7:45 and then take the last 15 minutes for questions if you had some. Okay? There's a couple of other gestures that you may not be aware of. Everybody said that they like their flashlight, correct? So the flashlight, thankfully, of course, is available on your home screen right here. And if I press that, obviously I turn my light on. Now, something else you may not know is that if you press and hold it, you can actually, when it opens it up, it'll actually give you 3 levels of brightness. Have you ever done that? Let me get here to there. So I went back to my control center to the camera because actually there's 4 levels of brightness. Okay? So 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay? So that way you're not blinding somebody, but if you're, let's say you're trying to help them find something.
That must be, I got a
Uh-huh.
and I only have one.
Do you? Okay.
Here.
All right, well, good. Well, that's fine. Anyway, but my point is, so the lock screen is there, that's handy, and as is the camera. So why do you think you have those things really handy? One, we said we like the magnifier, we like the camera, excuse me, we like the camera, but I often say if I was ever if I needed to witness something and wanted to take a picture of it, I could just simply touch that, obviously, very quickly. I don't even have to sign in, don't have to put in my password or my facial ID. If I wanted to assist, in taking a picture of something, that would be a traffic accident or whatever too. So, okay. But here's the last couple of things that I was going to tell you that without even the lock screen on, let's see if this will work. Is I can actually tap the back of the phone to turn on the light. Did you know you could do that? Okay. So it's called there's settings in there. So and I have to tap it 3 times to turn it off, and sometimes it doesn't want to turn off.
What bottom phone?
This minus the 10x, like the X. So in
10X?
well, it's the X meaning the 10, Roman numeral 10, and it's minus the XS version, which is the larger screen size. But what do most people have currently for their phones? You mentioned you had an 8? SE. Okay, those are fine. Mm-hmm. 8. Okay, those are all excellent machines. And then, my daughter just bought the 13. The nice thing about the 13, of course, is she really likes to take a lot of pictures, and Apple's done an excellent job of cameras and whatever too. Now, did you, by the way, know that iPhones falling in the toilet happens to be a gender-based problem? Does everybody know why that is? So anybody that keeps their phone in the back pocket, which usually is the ladies, that's the most common thing that I've heard of, where everybody says, well, yeah, men have a bigger front pocket. So happens that my XS phone still fits in fine in my pocket, yes. Now, one thing you may not be aware of is when you purchase your iPhone and you purchase AppleCare, is it does come with a couple of instances of accidental damage, meaning that if you do get it wet, drop it, break it, and that type of thing. So the Apple is trying to help you so that if you accidentally do that, the phone stops working, you're not paying whatever hundreds of dollars to get your phone back. So Apple, through AppleCare, is trying to help you in that regard. Okay? So the last thing, I'm going to switch back to the computer for a second here, and then we'll talk about what potentially we can talk about in the future, if you so care. All right, so that's all right, so we just covered all these. Screen organization, situational awareness, we talked about some of that, but there's a lot more here, and we still have to type. And some other topics that, if you're interested, are different things like iCloud, passwords, and photos. Would any of those be of interest to you, and or do you have any other suggestions that you think would be helpful for yourself and other people? Yes, ma'am?
They'd all be helpful.
Would they? Okay, got it. That's important, sure. iCloud, okay. I can talk to you about iCloud for just a second. You want to hear about the iCloud for just a second? Just to give you what is it. And I always say when I've been teaching at the Senior Center, and the same thing applies here, I said in Iowa City, the seniors are all a very sharp group of people, professionals, work at the university and different things, department heads, for example. But I walked into the class at the Senior Center one day and I whispered under my breath, does everybody understand the cloud? And even with that very sharp group of people, I was getting a bunch of glassy eyes, and I could tell that was a good question because they needed an answer. She suggested that she had heard somewhere that literally her data was on a satellite somewhere. So her data was in the cloud somewhere, and I said, no. So what is the cloud? Somebody give me their explanation of what the cloud is, just simply. Any ideas?
Apple servers.
Servers, okay. But essentially, first off, let's ask the what, where, and the how. The what is there's a bunch of hard drives. You've all seen big hard drives like that. Let's say 50,000 or more. Where they're located in a data center, as we said, they're servers. These are all plugged in. They're all communicating with each other. Lots of flashing lights.
There's
So-
one in Iowa, isn't there?
Pardon me?
There's one or more in Iowa, isn't there?
I think there may be a data center around here. I'm not sure exactly where. But so what? A bunch of hard drives. Where in a data center, and how is you happen to use the internet to get the information there. So literally, the cloud is just a bunch of hard drives in another building. Okay? But when I first told the story, I said that everybody was all excited. They had smiles on their face. They now understood what the cloud was. It's a bunch of hard drives in another building. Use the internet to get the. Then I said, why? They said, oh, I'm not sure why. The why that I'm trying to lead to, and of course I know it has different applications. The why, when it comes to the cloud, is that you're, in reference to computers and backing things up, is you're separating the backup from the computer. Heaven forbid you had a tornado, hurricane, forest fire, flood, or whatever too. You want to separate the computer from the backup, or vice versa, because you want to protect all your data. So that's another one of the purposes of the cloud. Now, of course, if we pick that subject and talk about it, obviously I can tell you a lot more about it. Okay, good question. Any other questions?
Does the data automatically go to the cloud?
Apple likes to try to make it very simple for it to go to the cloud. Now, I personally, now, this is where, remember I explained that as a research scientist, you can be technical and meticulous, might be a little obsessive compulsive. So my answer to you is where you're going to see some of my obsessive compulsive about, is that yes, Apple tries to make things automatically go to the cloud. But if you're like me, how do you know that it really went there? And when you want it and need it, can you get it back? So I often say that if something is happening automatically, I'd rather turn it off and I'd rather do the backup manually. So in one case is I prefer to have a physical hard drive in my hands to do a backup. Now, does everybody have Apple computers? And if you do, Time Machine, have you ever heard of Time Machine? Time Machine is software that's already present on the computer, and all it's looking for is a little external hard drive to back up to. So what did I say about the cloud? So if you have your computer, back it up via Time Machine, obviously you can't just unplug the backup drive, you have to eject it, unmount it, or whatever. And then if you separate it from the computer, put it in a fire safe in the house, safe deposit box, or whatever, that's your own cloud storage right there. So in some ways, that's my preferred method. Now, yes, it's okay to take advantage of Apple servers. And so, for example, yes, a lot of people like the idea that they have an iCloud turned on with their photos, and as soon as they take a picture, it goes to the cloud, and then if your computer is listening to the cloud, the picture ends up on the computer as well. Problem is, though, what happens if you don't have a lot of storage on your phone is that it's almost like a suitcase that you're filling up, and it's hard to get, how can you take more pictures if my suitcase is full? How can I go on another trip? Does that make sense? So, also with the sense of information too, yes, Apple tries to back things up. There's a feature called Desktop and Documents in the cloud. So anything sitting on your desktop or in your documents, if you put pictures there, documents, they will automatically go to the cloud. I've seen cases where someone said, can you turn that on? And he had like 4 or 5 different computers, and I turned that feature on and just kind of blew everything up because it was like 5 different computers all trying to talk to the cloud saying, okay, what's the desktop look like here? So again, there's situations where it sounds good, but I'd rather do it manually, and we could discuss backups in the future. Okay? Other questions? Now, do you like using your iPhone? That's the whole idea. We want this to be fun, correct? How many people use it as their grandma brag book? Right? That's what it's for. Now, the one caution that I say that when it comes to photos on your phone, do you have a small album with just maybe 10 or 15 pictures that you want to show if you want to show like your grandchild or your children, rather than flipping through 1,000 just loose pictures in your camera roll? So those are things too that I discussed that if we wanted to, how do you, for example, deal with photos? My personal preference again, your phone is like a suitcase. You've got things in it that you want to take home, so you connect it to the computer, and you move all the photos into the computer directly. You use Time Machine to back up those photos, to back up the computer. And now your photos are in 3 different locations: phone, computer, and backup. So now it's okay to delete them from the phone. And now there's more room, like a suitcase, there's more room for you to take more pictures. But the last part of that is that you can also, from the computer side of things, create albums of your favorite pictures that you then take back and put on the phone. Think of it again, back to my suitcase analogy. You're going on a trip. What do I want to take from my home with me on my trip? And that's just information going back there. Again, that's my personal preference for manually moving pictures back and forth, as opposed to the automatic cloud. Okay? Anything else? Well, Lindsay, it's too bad we can't get any questions from the West Campus. Yes, ma'am?
I have trouble getting Siri. I just get the thing going round and round and round.
Sure.
I used to get her, and now.
Siri is dependent, she is dependent on the internet. So if you're in the middle of the desert somewhere, or let's say you're having let's say your cellular, let's say you have AT&T, and for some reason this room AT&T is not getting internet, and you're not connected to the no Wi-Fi. Yes, so Siri does require the Wi-Fi. And so if you go to ask her a question, she said, "Sorry, I can't do that right now. I've had that as I'm driving, and I can't do it now. That's because I'm in a dead zone with my AT&T reception."
Okay.
Yeah.
That's where I tried that.
So if somebody's talking to Siri, I'd like to hear what kind of questions do you ask Siri?
I have to call phones all the time.
Okay.
Call Bill.
Sure, yeah. See, that's the whole idea. Now for example, remember how I said Siri, she's not as intelligent as I'd like to have her be, is I like to play golf at Finkbine Golf Course. Well, I would say to Siri, call Finkbine Golf Course. Well, she could never differentiate the FI for Finkbine, and she'd say, "I'm sorry, I can't do that." So do you know how I fixed the problem? Is I left the phone number the same, but I changed the name of the Finkbine to One Potato. So now I just say, "Hey Siri, call One Potato," and she gets it right every time. So since I like to play golf, what do you think Two Potato is? Is Brown Deer Golf Course, right? Yeah. So I have to remember that.
Riverside.
Yeah, I played down the Riverside too, yes. Okay? All right. Well, if we think we've got, time-wise, we're at 7:53. I don't want to hold anybody up if there's no other questions, or? Yeah, like I said.
One other one.
Sure.
I taught my grandchild how to use my finger. Or
Yes.
thumb.
Yes.
The finger to open it up, but
Sure.
it doesn't work.
Okay. So,
So,
meaning that you have your home button, if you try to touch. Now, normally, it depends on if you have restarted the phone, you have to put in your 4 or 6-digit numeric code to make the in my case, facial recognition or your fingerprint work. So, but you're saying it's not, so you may have to go through the settings again to set up, the finger. And I jokingly say if you set it up with your finger, just don't lose that finger, right? But don't worry about it. No, I'm just kidding, because you still have your 4 or 6-digit code. Now, don't forget your 4 or 6-digit code. I've had way too many cases of someone bought a new computer, and she not only locked herself out of the new computer, she locked herself out of her iPhone, and Apple's security locked her up for 3 weeks. And she was, can you imagine how disappointed she was? She couldn't use her computer for 3 weeks, and she couldn't use her phone, so she was almost giddy when I was there, and Apple finally gave us permission to log back in. So that's where passwords could be a good thing too. We could talk about passwords and the best way to deal with
so
it.
you have to tell your settings that you're now using your fingerprint.
That's correct, yeah. You have to, the phone has to learn what your fingerprint looks like. And anybody with their new laptops, for example, I have a 2020 MacBook Air. It has a button on here that if I wanted to unlock it, I can use my finger too. But yes, the phone or the computer has to learn what your fingerprint looks like. Okay, and as you're setting it up, it's almost like where you're touching it is like a camera, and every time you touch it, it takes a picture. So you want to take multiple pictures of your finger, and then it'll finally say, "Okay, I've got enough pictures. Next time you touch with your finger, I will recognize you as you and let you go." Okay. All right. Well, that's that's it. Glad everybody came out. I'm glad you don't have to go outside. I have to go back outside. It's nice cool weather, but it is going to get warmer, right? All right, well, thank you very much.